So thank you very much, James. So my name is Emem Usanga. I am a UX designer stroke consultant. I mainly work with startups. But enough about me, because we're here actually to talk about these guys here, because it's all about their opinion. So guys, if you just pick up the mics and hit the mute button. Unfortunately, we've got to share two mics because one of them has died. And if you just want to quickly introduce yourselves, who you are and what you do, that'd be great. Yeah, there we go.
Hi, I'm Shawn Cheris. I work for Adobe. I'm a director of experience design, and I manage most of our centralized efforts around brand and experience.
Hi, I'm Saswati. I manage the UX research team for all international markets for Uber, and excited to hear what you guys have in mind for us.
Hi, I'm Andrea. I'm the former UX lead at Sony Mobile. Just left the company, so.
And hi, I'm Amanda Salter, one of the co-founders of Newt, and we're a service design agency based in London.
Thank you very much, Andrea. We should be able to have an interesting conversation, an honest one, yes? So the title of the talk is, designing on a global level when global means more than markets. And so let me define what I mean by that, right? So global in this instance means multiple things. Where Shawn is designing, he has to think about, best part of 120 products. That's a hell of a lot of products. So global in that sense means the amount volume of products that he has to design for. And Andrea, in his context, now we're talking about the organization, because we're talking about how you actually think about human-centered design within an organization. So you're not just thinking about you're not just thinking about one thing. You've got to think about all the different multiple levels and departments within an organization and how those departments are going to interact across tools, in terms of talking to each other, in an environment, so on and so forth. And then, of course, there is the typical, kind of what we describe as global, which is markets, moving across different countries. So I just want to kind of clarify that. But the first question I want to basically ask is to you, Amanda. So, because one of the things we're going to touch upon here is service design. Can we please clarify the difference between UX and service design? Because to be quite frank, a hell of a lot of people don't know what it is, or they misuse the term service design.
Yes, exactly. Well, how long have you got? Okay. Well, what I'm going to tell you is my own personal definition of the difference. Now, service design as a term, as we know, is evolving in its meaning as well. So ask me again in 6 months, it may well be different. Okay. So my current definition of service design is firstly, that it's opposed to physical product design. That's one of the differences. So, for example, in traditional product design, I would be designing the most amazing conference chair in the world, hardware, the thing. In service design, I might be designing a whole new way in which I can provide these wonderful conference chairs in a wonderful subscription service that people pay me monthly. And that is then a service as opposed to a product. The next kind of way of defining it in my book is that UX design is traditionally about designing a digital product. So it's either a website or an app or some sort of interface. And it's considering how that interface can fulfill user needs. Service design is adding context to that. So in service design, there's a concept of front of house, back of house. And a service designer would be looking at the stuff that you're providing front of house, everything the customer sees, as well as the stuff that's back of house. And back of house being what are all the other business processes need to happen, what technology needs to be in place to support the experience that you're providing.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. It was great. It makes a lot of sense. Andrea, can you kind of pick up on this, because what you're doing is you're designing, as you said, human-centered design organizations, and you have to consider so many different aspects of that organization, all the different touch points, not just the people in it, but all the different ways that they interact. So I'm literally sitting going, well, what she just said literally means that you're a service designer, right? Or something akin to that.
Yeah, thank you. So, well, the first thing that I like to do is to reframe the concept of design. Now, as a designer, we say design, and we imply UX or UI design, right? For me, design is just problem solving. Every time you solve a problem for someone, you are designing. And that's why the idea that I'm pushing here is that since you will be involved at some point during the decision of in the process, you need to be able and capable to do and take the right decision, right? So I try to go a little bit higher in terms of perspective, because for me, design really scales horizontally and across the entire company. So it's no more about, so if we talk about service or experience, regardless of the definition that we want to give to the discipline, for me, that's the easy part, right? So the hardest part is to try and understand the problem, understand if that's the right problem for the goal that we have. And this is something that happens everywhere. An example that I like to do is, for example, at Sony, and think about HR, right? Mm-hmm. If you work in the HR and you want to build the best onboarding process in your company, right? That's about people, right? So even in that context, human-centered mindset can help you to understand what are the needs, and then adopt a prototype mentality, and then get in contact with them, iterate, and move forward, right? But even for if you work in the marketing, think about the marketing. In marketing, you work on a new campaign, which implies a story behind that hopefully aim to touch heart and minds of people, right? But again, is about other people. It's not about yourself. So even in that context, doesn't matter if you work in marketing, doesn't matter if you work in HR, even more if you work in product, you should, if you solve problem for the people, adopt and embrace that type of mindset. So compared to the service, I try to just solve a problem from a step above and leave this part for later. Because when you sort that part, the rest will be a walk in the park.
Okay. So I just want to dig a little bit further into that, right? So we humans are creatures of habit.
Yep.
And then you're going to come along and you're saying, okay, now we need to design a human-centered design organization. And change is one thing that humans just don't do very well. What is the reality or the challenges that are involved in actually trying to make this happen within a given organization?
Yeah, I can tell you what is the reality. The reality is that if you change the values, you may end up losing people. But not because they have to change, but because they don't like the new, right? So they say, that doesn't reflect my self-identity. This is not what I believe. If you believe that you are a developer and your only goal is to write code, then someone say, look, for me, I look at you and I consider the impact that you have with the product, which, by the way, you have to write code to do that because you are developers, right? When you say, I disagree on that part, you end up losing people, right? And regarding the habits, that's why I stressed the environment, because then the environment, probably the ultimate goal of the environment is to create the least resistance path to the correct behavior, the one that you want to foster, right, in your organization. That's why I say, for example, in the talk, if you don't have a space that promotes that type of behavior, like the individual when you want to go deep, or the cross-functional communication in another area, the people, they don't do that because the environment suggests a completely different things. At Stanford, they say that the design of the place is the body language of the company. So that's why, and at the D School, for example, they push the concept so far. An example is they never use new notebooks. They never, because when a notebook it's new, you have that feeling of, oh, well, what if I want to scribble something that is not good? That's a brand new. So you always get used notebooks, and even the paper. Sometimes we end up also like folding them, crushing the paper, because the people, they feel more comfortable in just trying stuff instead of giving a perfect white A4 sheet, right? This is just a small detail that can affect the behavior. So when you say the people that don't want to change, is true. That's because from human perspective, our only goal is to get to tomorrow consuming as less energy as possible. But then you can direct with the environment and monitor the behavior that you get. As a result, adjust and iterate.
Shawn, I'd like you to pick up on this because I'm like, okay, I'm trying to imagine human-centered design organization in Germany right now with your plethora of developers that you work with, right? So, because with you, I mean, because it's funny, it's interesting that your team actually has more developers in it than it actually has UX designers. So I think that's what I remember you saying when we were talking on the phone, because the way you build, it's like. So by the way, when normally we were always talking about, so what you need to do, you need to go build Scrappy, and you need to go and do wireframes. Blah. They don't do that at Adobe, by the way. They work with the developers, and they literally, it's like we're designing, we're building it here and now. That's the way it works, and I'm like, okay, that's crazy, but that's the way it works. Now I'm trying to imagine this concept of human-centered design right at Adobe, where it's like now we need to change the way we work and the way we interact. How do you see that going down with you guys, especially your team in Germany?
Wow, okay. It's a lot to unpack. So, to clarify, like my particular team has about as many developers as designers because we're developing tools that other designers throughout the organization use. Our whole org is about 250, 270 people worldwide. And the team that develops the human interface guidelines is, I think, about 15 now. And that just came about as a means to an end, because at the end of the day, like, it's just more effective to build this stuff and to show people how we want it built than to draw pictures of it. Individual product designers still do a lot of prototyping. It's just for us, there's not really much value in that. I'm not sure I picked up the Germany team part.
Yeah, I've got to hear about the German team and trying to make those changes. I'm like, well, people are stuck in their ways. I'm dying to know how they would take to that. If it's like, okay, we need to rethink how we work together in a German situation. Because in my head, I'm like, can you apply that across, in different countries, across different cultures, in different places? How easy could you make that happen? And I'm struggling with certain markets already.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess the short answer to that is we spend quite a lot of energy as a design org building community and building a shared vision. At least once a year, we fly everybody in from all over the world. We have 40-something designers in India, there's some in Germany. We have people all over the place, and we fly them in for a week, and we commiserate, we present work to each other, we talk about a shared vision. We just meet constantly. It's just the only way we can keep on a string. Because you're right, there are a lot of differences in our designers worldwide, but I found it to be a source of great value versus something to be overcome. But creating a shared vision is definitely something you have to work at constantly.
Yeah, I can understand that. Saswati, I want to kind of bring you in at this point. Okay. So I want to bring you in at this point, and I want to kind of take a little bit step back to this concept of service design, right? Because when we're talking Uber, at the end of the day, what we've got is a user interface that most people interact with, and that's supposed to be it. But essentially, that's not what you're actually delivering. You're delivering a service, and that is a transportation service. Again, how the heck do you guys design for that? Because you've got to take that into account, that the experience is far beyond what is on that phone.
Yeah, totally. I think from an Uber's perspective, for us, the app is one of the touch points that we have when we interact with our riders or our drivers. But what we are really interested in is kind of managing and building for the whole experience, which is from the time you decide that, well, I need to go about my life in a certain way today. How do I start planning for when I go out, whether like that's going to be an Uber or some other transportation mode? If it is Uber, when do you want to call that vehicle? When should it arrive? Where should it arrive? So for us, that entire experience, not just of working with the app, but do we get you to your destination properly? Do we even enable you to explore while you are on a trip what is around you? And when you, let's say, like when you are at a venue, like, have we delivered you to the place where you want to be safely and sound and on time? All of those matter. So for us, kind of building, when we think about building that whole experience, a big chunk of it is like get the basic right, which is like, yes, the basic is like the app works. It's like, does that, like, when you press it, does it open, does it react, does it, like, does it get you the vehicle in a time that you want it to arrive? So get the basic right is like always our like sort of first motto, which is like, if that doesn't happen, we will not have you. But then on top of that, what we are doing is we are building more layers of experience. So if some of you, for instance, you use Uber Eats, our idea is that for people who live in busy cities like London, you should be able to be on your way back to home, for instance, in the evening, and still be able to call for your food if you need to, and the two arrive almost synchronously. So for us, it's like we are now beginning to think about how do we make that holistic experience of getting the things you need brought to you smoother. And the way we are looking at it is like we spend an incredible amount of time just trying to understand what people's lives look like. What does their travel look like? What, like, how much do they value time? So when this is like 9:30 p.m., like, you're super hungry, like waiting 10 extra minutes makes a huge difference than at 5 p.m. So for us, like understanding those very specific moments of time and how that impacts decision making is a critical way in which we think about experience design.
I did actually experience. People who were in front of me literally got home and the Uber Eats guy was there.
Yeah.
And it was like, I was literally looking, going, oh, well, synchronized. Yeah. He hasn't been there that long and picked the food and that was it. It was done.
That's what we work on every day.
Yeah. So one of the other things I want to pick up with you is this whole idea of how you do UX research without being in the market, right? So I know some of the things you spoke about is, you speak to people, diasporans who are here, and you will talk to UX experts over there or, people who have some sort of expertise in their country over there, but you haven't gone on a plane yet and you haven't gone anywhere. And so I want to throw that out to you three guys, actually, and in terms of, the value of that. And do you see it as a way, as a valuable way to be able to actually perform UX research? Because there are some people who go, no. You need to, you plan, you get on a plane, you go to the market, and then you go do it. And you're saying, well, no, we don't need to do that.
No, I'm just saying, like, start small. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying don't go there, because that's inevitable. But
Yeah.
I think it's like, one of the things which I see is like, I feel like there's a lot of organizations who could be doing this, who have the bandwidth to do this. But I think there is a mental block here, which is like, this is either going to take a huge investment, this is like, going to take a lot of my time or my team's time. And I think for me, as a practitioner in this field, it's really important to give the audience some tools which takes that excuse away. That, you don't have to think about growing internationally by taking the first flight out there. There are other things which you can do wherever you are.
Okay, well, it makes a lot of sense. So have you guys kind of had any experience of that in terms of not necessarily having to get on the plane? I'll kind of come to you in a minute, but not necessarily getting on the plane, but actually being able to, find that information that you need, not, by actually communicating with others, but sitting in a totally different country in order to acquire knowledge of that particular market. Have you guys actually done any of that at all? Was that an approach that you would consider?
One of our clients, a big grocery retailer, they did commission in-country research, and it was kind of done from a distance because they sent field workers out to those countries. So it wasn't like the business owners were flying out there. They commissioned research in a different selection of countries, and then they sent the results back. So does that count in your book as?
Yeah, well, it
research
does
being
to a
done
certain
or
extent.
not
Yeah, it
done?
does, especially because the stakeholders were not the ones that were actually there as such. So one thing I did forget to mention earlier is that this is an interactive session. So if you do have any questions, by all means, at the point at which you have the burning question, raise your hand, and you can do so. Go ahead.
Shawn, during your talk, you mentioned how you have a small. Thank you. During your talk, you mentioned you have this small design team, and at one point you were actually creating stuff which you knew you didn't like because senior management were probably going to ask for it anyway, and you wanted to go back and just say, yeah, we've tried that. So in big global organizations, I wanted to ask the rest of the panel, do you have any other tricks for keeping other outfits maybe abroad or higher up in the tree from stamping all over good work?
Okay, cool. Yeah. Well, there is no silver bullet. It's down to people intelligent. So if you don't trust, if you don't have a good level of trust across the company, that's the results that you get. Because I mean, if I trust the man, and we worked together like 10 years, I know that even if sometimes didn't succeed as I wanted, there was always something good in form of learning, for example. I don't need to sign off on anything from him. I'm paying probably as a good amount of money to be in that position, right? But this is a human thing. So it's like a good relationship, right? So if the other people is not willing to trust you, there is nothing you can do, right? You can just behave in the correct way and show that, look, that's the way I am. I'm transparent. I'm in front of you, right? People say, no, I don't trust you. It's just his or her problem. You can't solve everyone's problem. And I know that that is not probably the answer that we want, but after like 20 years fighting with the stakeholders, I find my peace of mind. I do whatever I can. I translate every single design decision in business terms. I never say that's better because it looks better, right? Because you can also say, look, inside the team, that's what we say. Then when we go in that meeting, we say, okay, if we do this, we can get plus dot in conversion. Depends from the business model that you have. We can get more downloads. We can get whatever it is, right? You convert everything in his or her language, and then you show the benefits. And then you just have to wait. If the people just don't trust you, you should probably leave the company.
I think it's, is this? I'm just, I have really bad luck with microphones today. Yeah, and I think with UX work and service design, you can apply research to it, and in many cases it's easier to quantify. Absolutely. Brand stuff I found to be kind of a special challenge because it has this sort of like veneer of approachability that makes people think that they know something about it, because it's very easy to have an opinion about like a color. Or when people who are product managers oftentimes will evaluate a brand, they'll want to speak to it in terms of like their preference or what they like. And that's always a challenging conversation to explain to them, like, oh, no, that's not what we're doing here. Like, your preference isn't really a factor. We're solving a business problem. Do you have any business reasons why this particular branding approach doesn't work? And sometimes there is. But most of the time it's just their opinion, and you just have to sort of like very casually deflate them. Yeah. But yeah, that's where like those studies you were talking about, like just in case we're talking to somebody whose opinion is more important within the company and whose ego is more difficult to deflate, it's good to actually have physical, proof of like, no, this is a bad decision. Let me show you like how that goes. And with our brand in particular, it's all color based, and like everyone thinks they have like a good handle on it.
Has that ever backfired and someone just said, actually, yeah, I do love that. I'm really glad you did that. I love that.
Yeah, it's a fine line. It's the old, it's the old adage: don't ever show anybody anything that you don't want them to pick. We just try to make it a ringer, where it's very obvious that it's a bad choice, and we just try to do our best.
I think one good thing that I just remember from your talk is put people in front of the customer. And I can tell you a lot of story about that. People, senior stakeholder beyond the mirror, what the fuck are you doing that? No, press the other one, right? So even in that case, you see, if you don't have the intelligence to understand the situation, but what she did was a good one. You just put in front of them, that's like a Ramsey, right? When they bring the customer and say, look, just the footage, shit, right?
So then, in that case, is there a justifiable argument for UXers getting a seat at the C-suite? Is it time for that to happen? And if so, why is it taking so damn long? What do we need to do to make it happen? Amanda.
Okay. I think we are making strides in this department. I've seen many, many more organizations now appointing somebody called a chief customer officer, although you're not entirely sure what the job remit of that person is, because it could be everything or it could be nothing. I think one of the challenges that we find speaking to people who are playing that role is, well, there are many, many challenges, but one, the fact that they're having to align all of these other departments in their way of thinking, the customer-centered way, and it's actually really, when you get down to it, businesses are there to make a profit. And trying to shift that mindset, it takes a lot of shifting. It's like, you know, trying to turn an oil tanker. Another challenge we find is that chief customer officers sometimes just don't get the budget that they need. So you might just be like, you're sort of a lone soul dissenting voice. You're at the C-suite, but because you don't have the budget and because you don't have a massive team, nobody wants to listen to you anyway. So I think there's quite a few challenges that will take a while to be overcome.
Anybody else got anything to say on that? I mean, I would like to say that actually that basically means that UXers need to learn to hustle. They need to basically match and pair them with a bunch of sales guys. Trust me, they'll get the budget.
I think that's really right on. You know, I think one of the things which, just kind of building on that idea, is like budget often is one of the challenges, but I think there's a collaboration angle here, which is just like go collaborate with the marketing team. Like, you know, like 60%, 70% of your work mutually benefit each other. And in every company I have worked, the marketing team never has any shortage of budget. So that's like the short answer. Which
They
is
know
like
how to hustle for the money.
Yeah, it's like just go and work with them and help them tell a better story with your research or with your design and so on. So I think that's one part of the deal. The other thing is that I think the discipline as a whole, although it's kind of been around for like, 30 years or so, I think the implementation of in actual product, it's only started really becoming mainstream, I would say, in the last 10 to 15 years. Like prior to this, it used to be in like specific organizations, but as a mainstream, it's only now. So I feel like we are getting to that time when, I don't think we are very far from it, where we will have like chief UX officers in that C-suite. I think it's happening already. But what is really important though is that this is not just like a sort of a titular position. Like, it's like a nice to have someone in the C-suite. So I think for us, the next challenge is how do you be in that level but actually drive strategy? So it's not just about the great design or the great research, but it's about being able to connect both of that to the overall business goals and be able to speak that actual language of business. So sometimes as a practitioner, I think we have to get there where we are not only talking about what we know from our own discipline, but we are also have that empathy which the other part of the business understand, and we are able to merge the two.
Sorry, just jumping in again. But then if there's any organization in the world which should have a UX person, in the C-suite, it's got to be Uber. I mean, it is a UX. That's the product, is the UX. I mean, there's very little UI there. It's, it's a very, very good and slick UX. So if you guys haven't got one.
We do. We
do?
We just recently got our VP of design. And
my boss.
Yeah, his ex-boss,
right.
just acquired that. And we also have like a director level position for research, which is I think we are Uber is one of the companies right now who's pushing very hard on recognizing that experience is actually like a part of the business strategy.
Okay, so just one final point on this then. In terms of convincing C-suite, the lady on the end, you said at the moment you know, there's not the, we need to kind of, we can't kind of prove we make money or something like that effect. Surely it's just a case of convincing, if us as UX and the UX industry can convince of our value, that we will make you more money, the more you spend, the higher the ROI on UX, it eventually becomes a no-brainer simply to get us in there. So surely it's just a case of us educating the businesses. That's where we need to be.
Yeah, and I think it's about being aware of what business KPIs will drive the change. So we need to, as you said, start talking the language of business, start connecting the dots between what are the design metrics that move the business metrics, and once we can prove that in a better way than we have right now, we'll be on there.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. And I think we have two factors. One, of course, is the environment. Now is receptive. We know that we reached the tipping point in terms of design adoption. And the other one is that the designers are still, for the vast majority, not ready to just work on those shoes. Because, look, if you, at the California College of Art in Oakland, you have a beautiful program. It's an MBA in design strategy. I love it. I just promise one day I'll go there. But
My alma mater.
really?
Drop out.
7 or 9 years ago was the first on the planet. I know Nathan Shadroff and was the chairman at the time. But if you look around, how many MBA in design strategy you see? Now it's 7 and 9 years since the first edition, and still not that many, right? So the people are forced to go on the classic MBA to get some business knowledge or understanding or foundation. But what I'm trying to say is that now is the right moment, but it's on us try to find a way to grow and live up to the expectations. Because if you look at a CTO in a boardroom, it doesn't talk about code. Oh, that's the API, that's the method, that's the function, right? But you still have designers that they go in a boardroom and say, look, it's beautiful, right? And as she said, that doesn't cut, right? So it's probably more us to grow up to that level. And I like always to take responsibility and get in control. That's my point of view.
So as a CTO's job basically is to obsess over money, right? They obsess over the cost of technology. So this is where most people get it wrong, right? So you have startups and they're all running around and like, we need a CTO. It's like, no, you don't. You need a full stack developer. A CTO obsesses over the cost of technology to a tech business. They don't code. That's why they can sit on that board, you know, they can sit in the C-suite and have that conversation because that's talking directly to the bottom line of the business. And I think that's where, you know, if the UX designers who are sitting there, that's where they need to get to, is being able to connect to and being able to talk directly to the bottom line. Which then brings us to the very interesting topic of UX UI. So the amount of times we see this, okay, I want a UX UI designer. And I think one of you commented and said UX designers need to stop trying to be artists. And I'm like, yeah, let's have this discussion. Because if we're going to have a seat, you know, at the board suite, but you've got individuals obsessing over how, you know, beautiful something looks, we've got a bit of a problem here. You know, should we be crossing that boundary? Should we be worrying about the beautiful thing? Or should we be focusing on something else?
Well, the difference between design and art is the art is self-expression. It comes from a selfish point of view. You want to put something there to throw a message, while design is more altruistic, it's solving problems, right? So you already kill the art part, right? So just go to art school if you want to just paint. No, really, if you don't solve a problem for someone, and if you're a good one, you are not able to build a sustainable business model, like I can bring you from point A to point B, and then I just put behind a good business model that create a great startup, like Uber. You are not a designer, right? So that's the first thing. But I want to say something on the UX UI, because that is really touched me, right? So it's that is part of the bad heritage that we have in the design community, right? Is UX and UI. You still see people that they believe that they can be designer knowing just UI. And I'm not talking about BVI, brand, the perception of the company. That's a different story. But for example, in my team, we call it experience designer. So I acknowledge that you may not be a ninja in UX and UI, or even less sometimes in research. That's why we have research inside the team. But you need to be able to stand the conversation inside your multidisciplinary team. You can't just say, come up with something with no sense because you don't understand UX, right? So that's why I like to reframe the roles, because if you say UX, UI, and you imply that you need a head of UX and head of UI, I will highly recommend to just have one guy to send a strong message. And there is no that separation. Should not be that separation.
Yeah, honestly, this conversation like seemed insane to me like 4 years ago. I can't even believe that like we're still having this conversation.
Yeah. On LinkedIn sometimes.
It'd be like 20 years ago if you were a print designer, you're like, I only do posters.
Yeah.
You know, I focus on, you know, rectilinear objects that are about like this big, and that's just sort of like where my focus is and where my skills are. That's really the only thing I know how to do. It's like, it's insane to me. Like sorry.
Amanda, do you have anything to say on this one?
Other than it's an insane conversation. Okay. I have seen in the industry a whole bunch of really amazing, I mean, I'm sure all of you here are really good, you know, user experience designers in the experience, the wider sense of the word. I have unfortunately seen a whole bunch of people who call themselves UX/UI designers. And I think that if you have that on your job title, please don't make it that, because you're acknowledging that this is a conversation worthy of having. So I think you guys need to take a stand and say, am I a user experience designer in the wider sense of the word, or am I a digital visual designer, which is a totally, you know, totally valid skill set. It's very, very important. Nobody wants to use ugly or, you know, unbalanced looking objects. They're distracting to the experience. So if you want to be that, I think that's really, really valid. And I think you should be that if you're good at it, but you need to pick a side.
Find a job in another company, possibly.
Yeah. So this is one, it gets thrown around a lot, right? And you know, you can trawl through any kind of job adverts in any given day. I'm sure if I looked now, you literally is like UX/UI designer. And I'm just sitting there thinking, okay, I'm one, but I'm certainly not the other. And we have a problem within the industry as a whole, as in from the brand's perspective, from the business's perspective. Somehow we need to get around how to educating these companies that it's not, there's two different people, two different roles, not one person. And I don't know how that's going to be tackled. Any suggestions on how the heck we tackle that with businesses and telling them it's two different roles, please, not one? Because if anybody's got that suggestion, I'd love to hear it. So let me take a bit of a step back. Andrea, I want to ask you a question about, and again, it's one of the things that you raised, right? So design thinking, people. So is design thinking basically relabeled to make, you know, human-centered look kind of new, fandangled, and shiny?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and this is a fact. It was human-centered design since I don't even know. And then Tom and David Kelly, they decided to reframe as a design thinking. As I say, it serves the purpose of sell that mindset in the market. But now we reach the point when the very same definition that serves the cause now is just holding back, because if you say design thinking, right? We all know that the people say, oh, design, the guy that play around like Peter Pan in a room. There is some guy, maybe someone from finance, someone very old-fashioned in product. So we have to fight every day showing that design is a concrete thing, can generate concrete stuff inside a company. But then we call it design thinking, right? So even the definition itself, it just deviates from what it is. Because actually that is even a paradox, because design thinking, which embodies a prototype mindset, use the doing as a form of learning, right? That's the difference when you play with a wicked problem instead of a tame problem, right? You don't understand the problem, it's so ill-defined that you have to take action to understand more. So the execution is no more the pure execution that comes at the end of the solution, but it's something that you use to understand and plan the next step. So if we have to say, we should call it design doing more than design thinking, right? So that's why I'm against that. And I always try to revert back to the old human-centered design label. Because I think it's more empowering, right? Human-centered, at the end of the day, that's also doesn't help you to spread horizontally across the company, because think about it, you want to bring design outside the design team, and then you go to the dev team and you say, look, I want you to embrace design thinking, right? Say, why I have to think like a designer, right? I'm a developer. I got here because I have a good developer mindset. So, but if I approach it and I say, look, I want you to be human-centered, because what is important is the impact that you have on people, right? That developer say, of course I wanna create something meaningful, right? Let's go and do it, right? So just using different words, you get a different results. So I hate design thinking as a definition.
The importance of language, people. Think about it. Keep it in mind. Saswati, I want to come to you now, and this is also going to relate to you, Shawn, and it's about the importance of consistency, right, in design. And it's something that gets drilled home all the time. It's one of the key heuristics that there has to be consistency when you're designing a product or you're designing a service. But how the heck do you do that when you have to, when you're designing for diversity? Because it's not easy. So how the heck do you do that at Uber? Or what are the challenges, again, that you face in trying to make that happen at Uber?
I think that is like by far our biggest challenge today. I can't really say like we have a solution for it, which is like, hey, all our products are diverse, but they're also sort of very consistent. I can't say that, but it is the goal, right? Like it is the goal that we want to build an experience which works really like magically across the world, but also is informed by the world. So some of the things I think which we've started to do is really like when we are building out new experiences, one of the first things that I think my team is doing a really like pushing hard on this, which is, the default is, okay, the product is being built out of San Francisco, so let's just test a little bit in San Francisco and be done, right? But it's like, it was literally our 2017 like roadmap for this year, which is no product of Uber is gonna ship this year without testing in 4 to 5 different regions. And when you have to go out and make that statement, again, you need to get all your data together. Like as a researcher, it's not enough for me to go and stand in front of the leadership and be like, I think we should do this. And they'll be like, well, we think you should be doing way less, right? But the point is that can I show you enough sort of performance data which says that every time we've not done this, this has led to some sort of a failure. And I think being able to show that is like the first step, which is like tell the story with that data, which is what has happened because we didn't pay attention to both consistency but also the diversity. That's one. The second, I think, is just working, like because we are a global product, I think a huge part of our work is like really working very closely with the local teams. Because there's a lot of stuff that we can learn without even having to do like, any research. You could put the things, the designs in front of people, and they can already overnight give you some ideas about, hey, why might this not work exactly as you expect, let's say in like Philippines versus in SF versus somewhere else, right? So I think it is a responsibility of research as a whole to understand how do you develop these lightweight ways of getting feedback when you have to get like, when you have to get to this conversation about is this product going to be globally consistent. So that's one. But I think the other part, which is not a part of day-to-day, but kind of a long-term, like culture building, mindset building in the organization, which is it is okay not to be that consistent everywhere. Like it's a really hard thing because, like as a product company, you really want the same product to work literally everywhere so that you are efficient, time-wise you are better, money-wise you are better. But what we are learning is like, just as like there was like this quote which says like what, like culture eats strategy for lunch or something. I think that's really our experience, which is we may want this single unified experience, but culture is such a non-visible but such a huge factor in the way our product gets utilized that we just can't afford to turn a blind eye to it. So really, like for us, consistency, yes, we will continue to strive for it, but we are now pushing forward to this whole idea of being comfortable with diversity as long as we have a very solid baseline of what that initial experience needs to look like.
Yeah, well, I think it's worth pointing out that this is kind of obvious, but I'll just say it. Consistency, like globally, doesn't have any value. The only value that consistency has is in the experience of a single person, right? Just subtle, but it's important. We've been kind of in the practice for a long time because we, with most of our like flagship products, we localize in I think 26 geos, which is a lot. So we have a big internationalization team that helps us with, you know, some of the finer points of language and metaphor and those sorts of things. And I think we're shielded from some of it because our products are tools and people use them in a different way than they use like a service. But going back to your earlier question about like having, you know, keeping people globally on the same page, that's one of the things I was alluding to when I was saying we have this globally distributed design team, and part of the value that having those people all over the world provides is that they are a extremely effective early warning system when we're about to get something catastrophically wrong in a particular you know, culture. And also we invest a lot in research, of course, too. But yeah, I mean, consistency only has value like through the eyes of like the one person that's experiencing those things. If two people have two different experiences, that's okay.
Okay, fantastic. So, hold on, I just need to find, I've lost the question that I wanted to ask. This is a question, Andrea, reframing roles, which I thought was an interesting one, right? So, one of the things you mentioned during your talk is how you reframe roles. So actually, where a product owner then becomes an experience planner, or a mobile developer becomes an experience developer. And I remember when, you know, when everybody started to rethink journalism because of social media, right? And it had a massive impact on what it meant for the value of journalists and, you know, the role of journalists and what they were going to be called. And I'm trying to, the name of the news agency has totally gone out of my head. And I remember the day they announced that the editors were no longer going to be called editors. They were going to be called content creators. Now, that did not go down well, because at the end of the day, their argument was, listen, I have worked for how long? Because that title, editor, is a really important one, and it's a badge of honor. And to suddenly be told you're going to be called content creators, for Rory is probably an understatement in terms of what actually happened there. So again, how do you get around that? I mean, because that's an industry that's quite old. So this is something that's quite new. But again, how do you get around that in terms of changing these titles?
Well, first, I see some similarities, but I'm not sure, because that's also dependent from the culture of the role and, you know, the idea, what the people envision for so many years. I don't know if there is so close connection between the two, but it's very simple. And again, I'll probably be the blank guy of the panel, because if you are in charge of a company, and you can't do these type of things if you are head of design, because you can't really change outside the design function. So let's say you are, I don't know, Johnny Ive, Chief Design Officer, or you are Steve Jobs. That's as simple as, look, that's what we believe. Doesn't matter if we realize yesterday or 20 years ago, that's what we believe. That's what we believe is what we have to do in order to survive and thrive in the future. And from tomorrow, that's the way. You can't make everyone happy. And I know that is a little bit probably not romantic as approach, but it's like when you are in the meeting, the first thing that I used to say to my team is, look, I like everyone, but I don't give a shit about what you think or what I think. As long as we come up with the best idea, that's the only thing that matters to me. So if you have something, just throw on the table, let's discuss it. I can just give up in 1 second to my old one, right? But so here you have the role, and there is a fundamental reason why you want to do that, because the words, they affect perception, as you said. Probably didn't work in the journalism. Yeah. But in design, if your message, which by the way, this is just a small change. You can't just reframe the role and then disappear for 6 months and then you go back, there is a human-centered organization. Right? This is just a very small, just that, nobody noticed. But that aligned with 1,000 more decisions spread across the company, every single one has a different weight instead of. And you have to say that that's what we need, that's what we have to do, and reframing the role is something that helps people to see themselves in a different way. So actually help them to just, because help the overall conversation. If you are, as we said, the product owner, right? How can I say that the most important thing for you is the quality of the experience? If you are the product owner, right? And you say, look, well, the quality of the product, at best, can be my first priority, right? So it became hard to have that type of conversation, like, oh, we want to have an impact, we are experience-driven, that's what we want to deliver. But then you have UX, UI, you have product owner, you have business analyst. We call it experience analyst. So you need to understand, it's just a small piece of message that if you align it with 1,000 more decisions, they can help you to steer behavior, which, by the way, imply losing people down the road, because the people, they can say, look, I just don't like the new company, which is fine. You help them to find another job. No.
Help them along.
Yeah, because as a designer, I believe as a designer, we have that complex, so it makes everyone happy. I see a lot of my friends, they want to please the boss, they want to please the non-designers, they want to show that they can do great things, right? I try to say, look, you don't need to do that. We know that, right? Just go for it. And this is another example, right? So
one of the kind of penultimate questions I want to pick up on is something that you said, Shawn. You said our job, our UX designers, are done when we no longer need to innovate or invent something. Do you three agree on that? So let me repeat. Our job as UX designers is done when we no longer need to innovate or invent something. Thoughts? Because we got to think about. Because I'm thinking about you at the moment, thinking, okay, so at which point do you get to the point where you think, okay, that's it, we've reached the pinnacle of innovation, we've got experience, we've got it, we're there.
Did I say this when we were on the phone?
Dude, I was writing it down, going, oh, that is such a question I'm going to ask. Yeah, you said that.
I don't know if I believe that, but it's a good provocative statement.
That's what you said.
No, I think what I talked about was innovation as a last result or a last resort, because as you guys know, especially young designers, like the very first thing that they want to do when they're given a problem is like, okay, step one, invent something new. And it's like, no, that's the very last thing you should do. Like, I think what I said is like, if you as a designer find yourself inventing something new, you're probably doing it wrong. Because the world is like solved most generalized UX problems. And we run into this a lot where it's like, what is this menu? Oh, I thought it would be cool. No, the world is solved menu, kid. Like, we're good. We're good on menu. Also, like, scrolling behavior. There's like a whole bunch of these where it's like, guys, we're done. Like, there must be other things for you to work on.
get alive.
So you've done it. You got me all riled up into grumpy designer mode again. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we'd agree with you, right? We love the enthusiasm. Bring it, but tame it, please, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah. Let me add a small bit on that. And I think what we say that the day that we will have pretty much nothing to do, it will never happen, because if we work on wicked problem, by definition, they don't have enhanced state. So it's never going to happen.
So the final question now for this talk, which is basically the future-gazing question. So if you think about, kind of step forward and go to your 50-year-old selves, some of you may have to go to your 60-year-old selves, but what advice do you think your 56-year-old self might give to you now about what you need to think about in the future, about what is coming?
Just stay curious and stay hungry and just keep learning.
Cool. Yeah. Saswati?
I think get involved. Just like, I think there's a lot of time when, like we are faced with a decision and you're like, do I really need to? Maybe someone else will take care of it. And I think what I'd love to kind of just tell myself is like, if it really matters, like stand up and say something, do something, figure it out and bring that solution to the table. So whatever it is, just get involved if it really matters to you. Otherwise, don't be a blocker to other people. So either do it yourself, help others, or just get out of the way. Both work.
Yeah, I love this, stay young and stay foolish. That's probably one of the best. But I'll say you should work as long as you have passion for what you do, because it's so hard solving problems that are so challenging that without passion you don't really go anywhere. You end up working 9 to 5. That's the first thing. And then you have to keep working on yourself, because you can remain relevant if you want. It's just at work, like his director experience, right? But if it doesn't keep studying, keep grinding, in 5 years it became relevant, right? Because as you say, your stock is completely different, right, from 5 years ago. So it's that's probably the best. Just fuel your passion and just keep grinding.
I think I would probably say to myself, don't be too quick to dismiss a different area that you think might not be as important as experience design, because we're all in love with experience design. This is why we wake up in the morning. But certainly in the last 3 or 4 years as a business owner myself, I've learned a much more healthy respect for people who talk business language, people who talk technology, people who talk marketing. Never used to have any healthy respect for marketing. I do now, and I'm continuing to develop that. Brand. Used to hate the word brand. I now kind of still hate the word brand, but I'm trying to get myself over that. But all of these things are really, really important, and they're all component parts of experience design. So developing that healthy respect for other fields.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I think some of the key takeaways from this one was we need to get a seat in the C-suite, but that means that we need to learn how to hustle. And also, I'm just trying to think of some of the things that so we need to learn to hustle. We, as as UX designers, if you want to be an artist, by all means go to art school, but that is not what experience design is. So wrong industry for you. And also stay relevant, keep learning, be humble. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I want to give a hand to our panel.